Clement.
Yeah, so nice to be with you.
So nice to be with you. It's an honor. Raw foods pioneer. I think you've been raw over 50 years.
That's correct.
And you're world renowned. You're known all over the world. I actually, in Toronto last week, was at my local juice bar. Cheers, by the way. No fruit in this.
Thank you so much.
Greens,
Appreciate
so healthy. I was at the juice bar, and she was asking what I was doing next week, and I told her a few of the guests I was interviewing. And she said she's been to Hippocrates, and she said she never felt better in her whole life. And she actually said that she would see people come in with a huge goiter around their neck or with major problems. And 4 weeks later, it was like it was gone and they were so much better. She said she honestly never felt better in her whole life. She had nothing but good things to say. And she mentioned, too, that a lot of this was done, I think, on no fruit or low fruit.
Yes.
This topic interests me so much. So I would love to start with this. So you've been helping reverse things with people for so long now. You are a master. You are just amazing. And why no fruit? I'm wondering, I think I saw in an interview that you noticed with tumors, they were growing. I might be wrong, so correct me if I am, that you noticed the tumors were growing when you had fruit in the protocol. So I would love for you to speak on this because I'm fascinated by this topic. I eat a lot of fruit, so I'd love to hear about this.
So I was fortunate meeting a woman from Miami, actually, when I was just a youngster. I was 19, and it was the summer of 1969, and I was severely overweight. And she literally cracked me in the back of the head and said, "You've got to straighten out. You're going to die." And, you know, when you're that age, you don't think death is imminent, that's for sure. And she talked about how she had healed cancer on plants. Now, to me, that was as foreign as speaking a language from another planet. In my house, the only plant I saw is after I became a good proficient spear fisherman. It was butter, and in there was something that apparently was a stream being. But I couldn't really tell. It was a stream being anyway. And so she influenced me in such a powerful way, this 70-some-year-old woman, because she had reversed cancer, and I trusted her. She had an organization right here in Miami that she opened the door. It was a bank allowed them to take a room. And there were 200 people that had these remarkable stories. And there I began. And by 72, I was completely 100% vegan. And I was really vegan from 69 on, but I cheated. You know, every once in a while I'd say, "Gee, that ice cream just looks good." And until I felt awful from it, that was it. So now let's get to fruit. The easiest way for me to eat raw food, as it is most people at the beginning, is consume what I was addicted to, sugar. Now, we've been misinformed on sugar. You have people like Dr. Steer, who was on the sugar industry's payroll out of Harvard, saying that there's a difference in sugar. And without data, without substantial science, that's become the standard. And the body doesn't know that, though. The body doesn't listen to salesmanship. It listens to what it needs and what it doesn't need. But my diet must have been 50 to 60% fruit at the beginning, because it was quite easy to be a raw fooder. And now I joined the team of Hippocrates in 75. I was living for a short time in Maine, on my way to Oregon to open a health center on the Oregon coast. We'd open it from April until probably October, early October, and hike and eat plant-based diets. And I went to visit Hippocrates and our founder, Ann Wigmore, who healed herself in 1954 after the doctors told her she had 90 days to live in 1952 of plant-based diets. And I had no intent to be in cold, dark, you know, miserable, frankly, Boston. But my ego and my ambition outdid it. And I said yes, reluctantly. And they realized I like to articulate, I like to talk. And within a couple of years, they sent me to Europe. And when I came back in 1980, they asked me to direct the Institute.
Wow.
And was I prepared? No. As a matter of fact, I'm still learning as I go along.
Yeah.
Since 1980, my wife and I assumed the directorship. And we've had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, both in Europe, in the centers she ran in Sweden, the centers I developed and ran in Europe, as well as here. I've estimated that I've worked with 300,000 people directly, indirectly at the Institute in week-long conferences in California or in Europe. And as directors, it was a totally different responsibility, in my view, than when I was working with Hippocrates. Now you were coming to me and, in a way, putting your life in my hand, putting your trust in me. And I started to observe young women and women of all ages when they would consume lots of carrot juice, beet juice, mangoes, oranges, all of the fruits. Visibly, I'd see the tumors grow.
Wow.
And this was completely stunning to me because I was out teaching eat fruits and vegetables. Now, we're going to preface this in a minute so you understand fruit was the original diet of man in great part. And now I got to a point where it was frustrating. There was nothing in the literature, science literature. I would sneak in. My buddies would bring me into Harvard, and I'd go to NYU when I was there and UCLA when I was out there. You couldn't find anything about fruit and vegetables, no less don't eat fruit. And it happened to be a trip I was taking to lecture in Los Angeles. I was on a plane, and there was a guy next to me, a typical American. My wife always says, one way we can tell you're an American, they don't know you, but they'll ask you what you do.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there 3 hours, and finally he says to me, what do you do? And I mumbled because I was reading, and I said, I direct a center in Boston, a natural health center. And he said, is it Hippocrates? He got all excited, lit up. My aunt healed disease there. And I, to be polite, I said, what do you do? He said, well, I cultivate organic fruits with the University of California. I'm a professor there. And boy, was he sorry he opened his mouth. And the universe sent him to me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And he was very kind. He would never take a penny from me. But we subsequently talked for about 6 hours. And he said the Chinese started to cultivate hybridization of fruit thousands of years ago. So the guy at the top of the mountain spliced the part of the branch with the other part of the branch to have more cropped, sweeter fruit. And now we do it on steroids with genetic modification. And I said, tonight I'm going to be lecturing to people at the University of Southern California, and there'll be a lot of faculty there. What do I tell them? And he said, well, just be practical. He said, do you like crab apples? I said, no. He said, crab apples are sweeter than the original apple. I said, no kidding. He said, yeah, the fruits have about 28 to 32 times in general. Wow. My favorite apple at that point was 50 times more sugar than the original apple. And this is the problem. The second problem is we have a commercial development of fruit now. So what you are eating in Toronto, or what you're eating in New York, or other than if you're in California or Florida in the wintertime, are fruits that were grown thousands of miles away and picked weeks and months early. So here in Florida, I know for sure that the juice orange, which makes 50% of the juice of all orange juice in the world, is ripe in April. They begin picking it now in September.
Wow.
So the unripeness gets in, and this is why you see a current TV ad from a dentist that even healthy food destroy your teeth, and that's what she's talking about. So the massive high acidity level take the enamel off and pit the teeth and inflame arthritic conditions and this type of thing. To top it all off, the third issue now, we'll add one, is your pancreas doesn't work.
Wow.
Now, 150 years ago, the only people that ate processed sugar were the aristocracy, the elite, because it was a precious commodity that, in fact, they only ate about 1 kilo a year, about 2 pounds for the Americans a year of that. And it would come out, they'd eat morsels on their birthday or Christmas or some big holiday that was happening, and they'd lock it up in a cabinet. So if you went to a historic trip to a home of that era, you'd see they have a cabinet for that. Now, ironically, somewhere along the way, when Rockefeller took over the healthcare system, he said, you know, I'm making more money than any man in the world. He was the richest man in the world, but I know a business that's better than oil. And he said, that's healthcare, because at some point somebody's going to need a doctor. So in a 10-year period, he wiped out and he abolished traditional medicine.
Wow.
And called it folk medicine. That's where that word came from. So you picture grandmom on the front porch smoking a pipe, telling you what to do, who has no education.
Yeah.
And he put shiny objects in front of us, and he created the educational standard for medical schools globally. So if you go to China to medical school, you learn the same thing you do in New York or Chicago or Toronto. And it's about pharmaceutical distribution. It's not about health. And at that same time he was doing all of this, they started to realize we better put good drugs and bad drugs. And on the bad drug list were things like cocaine that happened to be, rightfully bad, inside of soda.
It's crazy to me, right?
So Coca-Cola had it in, knowing that you and your family and everyone that ever drank it would be permanently addicted to it. So they removed it and put a more addictive substance in called sugar. Now, when I say that, this is not Brian's opinion. I speak always with authority, experience, and massive science behind this. Princeton University did a study. It was very, very well done. They went on the street in Trenton, New Jersey, and Philadelphia, and asked heroin addicts and cocaine addicts if they'd spend the day getting MRIs of their brain at Princeton, which is close proximity to both. And they concluded at the end that when you take cocaine, part of your brain lights up. And when you take heroin, another part. But when you and I eat sugar, I don't care if it's fruit sugar or glucose or dextrose or sucrose, the whole brain lights up.
Wow.
So once again, it's dozens, 3 dozen times more addictive than heroin and cocaine. So there's lots of reasons I don't like it, but let's go back to the most important thing I said. It was the original diet of man. It's a perfect food.
Yeah.
I mean, you have these trees, they grow hundreds, if not thousands of, they fall.
Yeah.
You grab them before the bugs and the birds, you eat them, you spit out the seed, it grows another tree. So what happened? The hybridization, so it's 30 times sweeter. The pancreas no longer works because all at once government started to subsidize sugar, realizing that the industries could put sugar into things and get you addicted to those products. So now we broke the pancreas. And ironically, it was at one point the wealthy that ate most. Now the wealthy eats less, not far less. People with means in the developed world consume approximately 120 pounds of sugar in one way or another a year. The worst part of that story is our children. So let's take a little girl, a 100-pound, 12-year-old girl. We give her 200 pounds of sugar a year. And so the first drug pusher you and I ever met were our mothers. I had a great mother.
Yeah, no, they didn't mean to.
They didn't mean to.
Well, what do you think about all these people who are like healing on it though? Like you hear, like I read The Grape Cure, and you know, I interviewed somebody, 𝙎𝑼𝙑𝙀. So she actually she was in a wheelchair. It was crazy. And she did a 1-year juice fast though. And it was a lot of fruit sugar. And then she healed. So you do hear some of those stories?
Well, you're going to hear stories and then let's explain them to you.
Yeah.
When you look at these people, they're on plant-based diets, but their healing isn't coming from that. It's coming from what they removed. They removed the flesh food, the milk from other species, presumably processed foods, fried food, and that's where the healing. So that's a honeymoon, as I say. So we work with these people at Hippocrates. And so, yes, the disease may be removed temporarily, and then the degradation from this high sugar content begins. And when one is young, they can do that better than as you age, because what happens is your metabolism is working like crazy. So whatever you eat, even junk food, it comes in and out of you quicker than when you're 50 or 70 years old. So, you know, and let me say this, I don't want to sound like, you know, people are wrong for trying to do the right thing. And I think, number one, congratulations if you've made that kind of choice. And just keep growing. One thing that I decided to do when I was fairly young is never to let the stand below my feet be the same sand. So I study constantly, read, we do clinical research at Hippocrates. I'm interested in good science, and of course my wife speaks 7 languages, so we don't only read American science, and that's it. So if you're taking a step in that direction and fruit is where you are now, great, but keep looking forward. Keep looking at what's going on. Well, the words I say are not words established by my own prejudice. These are what the science community talks about now.
Yeah, absolutely. And psychologically, I would love to talk about, I know you've mentioned how, the greens versus fruit can change healing and things like that.
Yes.
But what about our mind or moods or depression or bipolar, anything like that? Do you think people in general, maybe who don't need to heal anything, but they want to feel happier or feel their best, do you think you feel happier too on greens-based versus
Much
fruit?
better.
Yeah? Wow.
So now we'll give you the latest science on that. This science, some of what I'm going to discuss is a year and a half old. So I couldn't have discussed this with you. I did an organization that we helped to create. It's called The Real Truth About Health, 𝑘𝑠𝑠.com. 10 years ago, we had our first conference. My wife and I conducted 40 hours of classes. And Stephen, this wonderful philanthropic guy who does it, says, let's do it next year. I said, let me tell you, if I do nothing else but study, I still won't have 40 new hours of classes. But let's get new people. So now it's 17 days, and we have 80 world-renowned experts that come in on their subject. And what we have to understand is that knowledge is consistent. It's perpetual. And with AI right now knocking on our door and going to be in the bedroom and with us tomorrow, it's not years away, humans will not be able to even come close to the amount of wisdom that AI has. And so to go back to what we were discussing a minute ago, is we have got to determine what we're doing by current knowledge. People always say, well, they said this 2,000 years ago. That's a big red flag.
True.
Big red flag.
Good point.
I mean, if I tell you something
point.
and we tell this wonderful cameraman here something and he tells a fourth person, by the time it gets to the fourth person, even though we have a sincere desire to tell, it will be a different story.
True. Great point.
So that's it. So that's where we are at this point. And so when it comes to healing, the body has all human bodies. We have 8 billion human bodies on the earth. And other than the primal Africans, the original people, 3 families of healthy bacteria in the gut. Now, these are families that congregate and pull in more bacteria and perpetuate more bacteria. One is called Prevotella. One is called Rheumacoccus, and the other is called Bacteroid. Their natural fuel is the cellulose from green leafy vegetables.
Wow.
Now, let me not stop there. So I'll expand on this because this is, if you're really interested in the primal diet, the original diet, all life, you and I included, the plants, comes from protons from the sun. So the sun's a gigantic star. If I put a suit I couldn't be burned, I would fall through it. It's only 2% particles and 98% gastric. And in the heart of that sun, remarkably, zillions, and that's not a joke, zillions of protons are born every second. This second, this second. Now, as soon as they're given birth, they bounce back and forth as if you and I would. Protons, neutrons, and we create friction. So when we walk out this door today and we feel the wonderful heat of the sun of Florida, it's actually the friction that's going on. Now, listen to this part of the story. It's amazing. For 100,000 years, this goes on in this star. Then it reaches the surface, and it shoots off. That's called a solar storm. So fast, it no longer is matter. It's no longer structure. That what it is light. Now, what evolved on this Earth? The Earth was nothing but water, and it was dead.
Yeah.
There was no life on this planet. And about 3.5 billion years ago, something happened where bacteria that was living without oxygen morphed to a cyanobacteria, which required oxygen. So by that happening, evolution said, okay, let's create it. And we believe it was nitrogen and vitamin C that gave birth to the first life form.
Wow.
Called blue-green algae.
Wow.
So one of the 39 supplements, living supplements I take daily is blue-green algae with 4 other algae. Now, that hung around for about another billion and a half years, and then the first land popped up. And what do you think the first land was? Australia.
Yeah.
Australia is 1 million years older than any other land. And then the bottom of the ocean was sand.
Yeah.
And the algae, invisible algae, starts going back and forth, and it evolved into grass.
Wow.
Now, the second thing that evolved wasn't grass, that's the third, was what you and I call sea vegetables. Arami, tzatziki. So the primary basis of the first, second, and third life form are algae and grasses. So every bit of life that will ever come after it, if we exist another trillion years, will be in that algae. Things that you and I haven't identified. I have a doctorate in nutrition. I would imagine we probably know 5% of what's really going on.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why the fish have so much DHA, EPA because of the algae, right?
Oh, yes, that's
Yeah,
it.
because a lot of people think they need the fish.
Oh, my,
but
so
the,
bad.
yeah, and the fish are riddled with parasites, right?
Parasites. And fish, by the way, fish oil is a carcinogen.
Really?
And adds to cardiovascular disease. But let's not forget the story. I'll go back to it again. The country of Finland had a really good leadership about 30 years ago. And they realized we're the bad standard, America. They realized that Finnish people were sicker than Americans. And that puts an alarm off in any country. Holy God, we're sicker than those people.
Yeah, right? What is going on?
So they came up with a concept. They said, well, let's get them off all of this, animal-based food and get them on fish, because fish is great and fish has oil. So the Minister of Fish said, yeah, let's do Finnish studies, not French studies and German studies and American studies. And they did it, and lo and behold, they took a group of 285,000 people. Half were on fish and fish oil, the other half weren't. And at the end, the group on fish and fish oil had double the heart attacks and strokes.
Wow, crazy.
This is all very widely available. The International Organization for Oil has never condoned fish oil. They know it's a carcinogen. And I see it, and the holistic doctors who just read Reader's Digest, supposedly, or some YouTube thing, put everyone on fish oil. And there's a company, if you really need oil, if you're not eating enough sprouts and not enough greens that have oil in it inherently, out of Norway, that's the best in the world. It has DHEA in it, and it's Zeno, Z-I-N-Z-I-N-O. So now let's go back to the original story. We're taking a big road around. So what was that question? I forgot.
No, I forget my main question, too. I was so interested in all those points.
Yeah, so anyway, so now the life comes back. The body's 3 bacteria, the families of bacteria.
Yeah.
Raw cellulose is what feeds it. Now, how do we know this? Because now we have the hardcore science on it.
Yeah.
So the proof is when you put raw, organic, uncooked cellulose into the intestine, more bacteria that's healthy is created.
Yeah.
Now, let's just take a minute, people. I know there's a lot of people out there who have a lot of opinions and little to no experience or their own personal experience, which isn't possibly what you need. Understand that you have only one reason you and I are alive and everyone else listening. It's your immune system. 80% of your immune system comes from those 3 families of bacteria.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you ask about the mind and happiness. 90% of your brain health comes from that bacteria.
Yeah, so what you feed your gut, that's what you're feeding your mind, yeah.
Now, I have a very close friend. Someday you should interview him. He's in Israel now living, though. Dr. Gabriel Cousens. And Dr. Cousens was one of the top of his class at Columbia and graduated as a psychiatric doctor, MD. And he's never practiced that way, and 35 years ago he said this to me, and I wasn't ready to get it. I said, how do you know that, psychological health in great part is because people are not eating raw green diets? And he pretty much, not in the way we can articulate it today, but explained what I'm explaining to you and the listeners out there. And when you have that healthy bacteria, you have this little switch, the serotonin receptor site, and it makes you happy. Now, what does fruit do? The original fruit did exactly the same thing. Has major cellulose, roughage in it, etc. But this high sugar fruit ferments in your intestinal tract.
Wow.
Now let's go back to Otto Warburg, who won in 1931 the Nobel Prize from a study he did from 1920 to 24, where he said, hey, all I have to do is reduce the oxygen in you, this healthy young woman, by 1/3, and you're going to get cancer.
Wow.
And people said, you're wacky. But then they looked at it and said, no, it's true. My good friend, who's the most important research scientist in the history of cancer, he's alive today still, he's young, he's in his 70s, Thomas Seyfried, actually went through those studies 3 times and said Warburg was a genius 100 years ago.
Wow.
So you don't want to put high sugar rates. Warburg and him said high sugar, when it mixes with proteins, which you and I need, even plant proteins, ferment. And when it ferments, it doesn't put a healthy, happy mindset into you.
Wow. And speaking of oxygenating, I feel like these really
Oh, these are
oxygenate us.
amazing.
Green
You're
juice,
really going to town on that. Look
like
at that.
nothing else, you know?
Nothing like it.
Well, are there any fruits that you think in the supermarket, if we do want to eat a little bit of fruit, are there any fruits that you think are closest to the original fruit that are ideal if we're going to pick something to include in our diet?
There's some that are better.
Yeah.
And so let's discuss it. So let's distinguish that people who have cancers, viruses, bacteria, mold, yeast, fungus, low and high blood sugar should eat no fruit.
Wow.
This is what we've done with thousands, hundreds of thousands at Hippocrates successfully for decades. So 42 years ago, we started that and immediately saw the healings start to go a whole lot faster.
Well, you
and a
must
whole
have been
lot better.
fascinated, right, when that started, when you did that and that happened.
This was so hard for me, love, because I was a sugar addict.
Yeah.
And even though I was seeing this, I'm thinking, I'm young, I'm okay, I'm healthy, I just can keep eating it. But let me get into that. Let's finish this one subject. I could talk for 20 hours.
No, it's
on
good.
this
I love it.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is you have these people like Dr. Steer saying, you know, white sugar is bad, but honey's good, and this xylitol is good. It's all sugar. It's all exactly the same thing. Oh, it's coconut. It's organic coconut sugar. It's sugar taken from a coconut. What white sugar is sugar taken from the largest grass that we cultivate about 20 minutes west of us right here.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, heroin is taken from poppy. Poppy happens to be a really good thing for you. But what do? They take too much of this, and what does that become? So I'm not equating heroin and sugar, but I can tell you, I gave up meat in a day, although I loved meat in 1969. I had no consciousness about meat and how bad it was and what it did to me and my health and the planet. Zero. But this woman was influential.
Did she just walk up to you and say something?
Walked
or
up to me. She was great. She was a New Yorker. New Yorkers
when
tend to
people,
do.
I love it. You hear these stories, like even Woody Harrelson, he had
Oh, yeah,
acne
I
all
love
over his
him.
face, and you hear his story when he was on a bus.
Yeah.
Someone just walked up to him and said, if you cut the dairy, your acne will be gone in 3 days. And he was like, my God, it was gone. And I saw a lady in front of me on the airplane when I was traveling to Miami, and her face, I felt so bad for her. She had acne all over her face. And I felt, you feel like saying, because you think, do they know it could be the diet, right? But I feel like it's almost rude saying something to somebody. Yeah. So that's great. Like, I like hearing stories when people say things to people like that.
Well,
I
the
think it's
bad part,
great.
if they go to the doctor doesn't mention diet.
No.
The dermatologist.
Yeah.
He'll
People are
give
so
steroids.
disconnected like
No,
this, right?
Again, we go back to the Rockefeller model of medicine. It's not about how the body works and what you need. It's about suppressing the disorder so that you get temporary relief and people are happy with the doctor. Now, I'm not saying all medicine is bad and modern medicine is, I mean, there's parts of it we use. We have a medical team that works with us. And so the reality is, but we don't practice mainstream medicine. We practice legitimate medicine.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference. So, yeah, the gut's important, and fruit is going to ferment because of the high sugar content. And we all love sugar, and you know, if you're not getting white sugar or honey, I used to literally, when I lived here in South Florida as a young guy, eat a gallon. My buddy and I would eat 1 gallon of organic honey a week. And we'd have those open mouth honeys, and we'd take whole wheat bread, and we'd put our hands in.
Wow.
And look, you know.
That reminds me, when I was a kid, this is different than that, but I used to go to the kitchen every day when no one was around and eat tablespoons of sugar.
Of course
white
you do.
sugar.
Of course you do.
Just tablespoons.
You can't get enough.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So what do you think is the ideal diet? What do you eat in a day? Like, or what is your ideal day?
Well, what I eat is a little different than a younger person who, you know, I'm an athlete, but I'm certainly not a competitive Olympic athlete. So we've got to differentiate.
And you're 72. I have to say.
72.
You look amazing.
I feel amazing. I literally, I mean, I'm not saying this to impress anyone, but I really feel like I'm 20 years old. There's no question. Today I lifted weight from 6 o'clock till 9 o'clock. I did a 1-hour interview with England, a fitness magazine, got in the car and drove here, counseled 2 or 3 people. And the reality is that's how I'm the normal 72-year-old person.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you know, what you see out there is unfortunate and it's sad and it's expected.
Yeah.
And you go to a physician, she or he says, hey, you get the old person disease. There's no such thing as old person disease.
I know. It's sad.
It's sad.
You know? Yeah. Well, you look incredible. Yeah, I'd love to know what you eat in a day.
So
I know
let's
my
talk
viewers
about
were
it.
asking.
I eat very little. I eat 1 meal a day. I'm fasting right now. I fast from Tuesday night until Thursday night dinner every week.
Wow.
I never miss a week. And the truth of the matter is, as your body ages, it starts to talk to you in a way that a 20-year-old body doesn't. It says, stupid, the more you make me work, the less time you're going to live.
Wow, true.
So I've read a little under 2,000 studies on longevity and diet. And the thread that ties all of them together is high nutrition in small amounts, reduce disease, and prolong life. So you want to be less sick, you don't eat a lot of healthy food. You eat small amounts of really healthy food.
Wow.
So we go back to my diet. The core of it is algae, greens, sprouts, which are living, they're bursting as a time. When we make green juice, they're this size. 50% are sprouts.
Wow.
And in the sprouts, there's the most important magic discovered in the history of nutritional science. It's called phytochemicals. And let's give you a little bit of that story. So when Ann Wigmore healed herself and we watched all these people come back from the dead from multiple sclerosis, easy. I mean, if all I did is diabetes type 2 and heart disease, I would have retired. That's so easy, it's not even worth talking about. But cancers and, Parkinson's disease, we didn't know why. So when I became director, my buddy said to me, you've got to ask for something. You can't be excited and do it. So I said, okay, I went into the board meeting and I said, what we have to do is discover how this works. Because every other day we'd have a new opinion of why it worked. We didn't do it, but the science community did. So way back in the late 80s, they interviewed young people, like teenagers and 20-year-olds. And for the first time in a century, kids were saying they don't like doctors and they don't like medicine. Why? Because they were brought up by hippie parents. Remember, now we're talking the 80s.
Yeah.
So the 60 parents were anti all of this and living off the earth. And it alarmed the pharmaceutical companies.
Wow.
So they put millions and millions of dollars in research. And they gave Johns Hopkins about 20.
Wow.
And they said, find a new way to treat cancer for the 21st century. And Hopkins was very wise. They looked at data, statistics from all over the world, and saw that cancer rates in the developed world and even Eastern Europe were pretty much the same. There's a real enigma. They looked in northern Russia, and there was one area where they had double-digit less cancer than the rest of Europe, and they ate the same horrible Russian diet, and they drank vodka, and they said, why? And they went up and found they were still eating traditional cabbage, lots of organic cabbage they were growing. And so Hopkins started to research the cabbage and found out that broccoli, which, by the way, is a man-created vegetable. That's not like an original vegetable. They mix something together, hybrid to get a broccoli. But it had the highest amount of medicine in it, called sulforaphane. So I'll say it again, sulforaphane. And they, just as they published a study in this country, a graduate student came in and said, hey, let's take the seeds of it. Now, how easy it. They charge astronomical amounts of money for the seeds of broccoli. I'm going to give you a little tip. Go to your organic farm or organic health store, take the broccoli, put some thread around it, hang it from your ceiling with a plastic bag under it. It will dry and those seeds will come out.
Wow, cool.
You don't have to do that. You can buy the broccoli seeds too, but they're a lot less expensive to do that.
Yeah.
They sprouted them and found out the medicine was 50 times stronger. So now I write books for doctors on this. I have a volume of medical books called Food is Medicine, and it talks about how we know exactly what medicines are in each plant to prevent and reverse each disease, not just cancer. So aging, we know that. In these books, I write about sugar aging people quickly, including fruit. And so why? It shouldn't have done that, but it's not the original fruit.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating. I heard you say that, or I read that somewhere, that the broccoli sprouts are 50 times more anti-cancer than broccoli.
That's not just our sprouts, anyone's. And today, they're becoming more popular. They're called microgreens.
Yeah.
We brought sunflower to the world, but there's enormous amounts of these. I mean, the three most powerful foods in the world, one is free. It's called edible weeds. And if you look online, you can find weeds of Canada, weeds of France, weeds of California. And pick them and eat them. They're free. Arugula, by the way, which is a weed, you can also buy it for $3 at Whole Food Market if you want, organically, has the highest calcium of any food known to man.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It's stunning, and I love it. It happens to be great. But what you have to understand is that real information and clinical work and things that work and things that matter are not getting to the public out there. Even the natural health field, in great part, is a moderate example of what we could do better at. Yeah.
And even, I know you mentioned calcium.
Yes.
See, we don't need dairy, you know?
Not at all.
I thought I heard you say, I don't know if this is a recent fact, but I did hear you say once that dairy you thought was, or you not thought, but was the #1 cause of cancer.
It is, but that wasn't my work. It was stunning to us. Now, Wigmore had this instinctual wisdom. She had no formal education, but after she healed herself, she had, she was sort of like that mystical Eastern European lady that immigrated to North America, who had that earthy sense about her. And it was frustrating to be around her because I was young and trying to find myself and was asking intellectual, challenging questions. And she'd never have an answer that was intellectual, but she'd have these really raw, clear, absolute, factual answers for me. And what we started to understand is that Wigmore in the 50s, nobody knew what a sprout was, got a message that sprouts are the most powerful food. We didn't know till 90. Remember this.
Wow.
Why she picked that. She didn't know why she picked it.
Yeah.
It's an instinct. And now we understand it's the most powerful medicine on the world with these phytochemicals. And, do other plants have it? Yeah, but if I'm going to eat a broccoli, why don't I eat a broccoli sprout that has 50 times more? I also eat broccoli, but the fact of the matter is broccoli sprouts are where the medicine is. In one of my books, one of my 31 books, I have something I worked on for 28 years. It's the sprout pharmacy, and different sprouts. The first sprout is apple seed sprouts.
Wow.
So what people spit away, you can actually grow into a sprout that's enormous. Do you know what that does?
What?
It opens up the arteries, which are veins, and more importantly, the capillaries. 74% of where blood moves through your body are little tiny microscopic capillaries. You imagine what that does for your brain, for your heart, and your libido. Important things. The other end is Z. It's a type of ginger. You can sprout it.
Wow.
And what that does for the diabetics, type 1, type 2, what that does for the neurological system. And, our medical team uses natural methodologies always, and at some times where people are catastrophically ill, you have to use temporarily a pharmaceutical drug. I've never seen a more powerful arsenal than the sprout pharmacy.
Wow.
For this. Nothing works better.
I believe it.
And cheap.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of juice out of it when you juice sprouts?
Oh, massive. Well,
Wow.
I shouldn't say yes. So, if you take an alfalfa sprout, you won't, or a pea sprout.
Yeah.
But if you take a sunflower sprout, you bet.
Okay, wow, interesting. And I juice a lot. I mean, a lot of green juice and things like that, and a lot of greens too. And a lot of people will come on the channel and they will make comments like toxins. These plants have defense mechanisms. They're bad for you. You just wait in the long run. Or they say the oxalates.
Oh, God.
So the
that's the
oxalate
latest.
topic is just never, it's never going away. I would love to hear your thoughts on the oxalate topic. I mean,
his name is Dr. Gunn, or Gunley, or Gunn. Okay. He's the one that brought this up.
Okay.
And I really wish he had done his homework before he became popular. Now, back in 1976, we were alerted by the docs we were working with at MIT that seeds had this magical pesticide on it that were there hundreds of millions of years before any animals were here, certainly us. We've only shown up in this form about 11,000 years ago. So now we're talking hundreds of millions of years. Remember, I'm talking billions of years when the first life form came.
Yeah.
So what happens is that nature's wisdom. Now, if you don't believe in mystical and godly things, listen closely, because I'm giving you science that you can actually convert over to mysticism. That the plants inherently understood that they were going to perish if the bugs ate the last seed or the animals ate the last seed. So put this natural pesticide on it that, in fact, prevented the bug or the animals from doing that. That's called an enzyme inhibitor.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Today they gave it some nickname and say it's bad for you and poison for you and you better eat chicken.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the truth of the matter is once you germinate the seed, that goes away. So that's why it's powerfully important that any seed, nut, or grain bean that you eat, you soak it and germinate it.
Wow.
And you also then increase the nutrients on an average of 8 times. So what that means, people, 8 times more vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin D, whatever it may be. You also make it about 17 to 57 times more digestible.
Wow.
Because, I mean, I know one thing. When I started to eat a healthy diet, I had never eaten anything but bland, overcooked, and saturated nothingness.
Yeah.
My body couldn't take roughage.
Yeah.
So I had nothing but gas.
No, yeah, and it can take people time, right?
It does
yeah.
take time.
I think they think, oh, I'm bloated, gas, this isn't the right path. And then they check out too soon.
Yeah, and the doctors who know nothing about nutrition but seem to have an opinion anyway say, oh, you can't digest raw food.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is you can only digest raw food because there's something to digest.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is your immune system, 80%, 90% of your brain works because of raw food in your intestinal tract. And the truth is 100% of every other species on this planet, 8 million species, eat 100% raw diet in nature. We're the only species that choose to cook our food. And, by the way, Hippocrates, for 70 years, has done clinical research. Sick people, healthy people, super athletes, movie stars, every walk of life from right now as we sit here in this studio, 9 countries are at Hippocrates. And we watch what raw food does. It's the original diet of man. And it's that simple. Now, my diet is about 90% raw. I eat a little cooked food. You know, this is not a culture or religion.
Yeah.
And we recognized from the work we did up in Boston at universities that once you're healthy, now that doesn't mean you come to Hippocrates and you're healthy in 3 weeks. This is the boot camp that begins your voyage. But after you've done it for a year, 2, 3 years, and we see your immune system strong and your blood cells are amazing. We don't just guess this, we see it this way. And then we can say, you can eat up to 20% of your diet by weight as cooked organic food. But when you cook a food, by the way, it becomes a problem for you. And I'll give you 3 scientific studies on that. First was done by Ryzhkinikov at Pasteur Institute in 1933, where he showed any level of cooked food, cooked plants included, your body's immune system identifies it as a foreign or an alien substance and attacks it. So you're compromising your immune system by eating cooked food. You don't want to do that, especially if you're sick. Number 2, 1952, when I was just a little one, they came out with a study and said any heated oil causes heart disease and cancer. We spoke a bit about that with fish oil, but even lettuce has oil in it. Spinach has oil in it.
Wow.
So we know that. That's established. By the way, the first one has been, they tried to challenge it 3,878 times. Second one, 1,962 times.
Wow.
The third one, they didn't do it. It was impossible to do it. Third one was pretty recent. That's the medical school my son's at in Stockholm, Sweden, and that's called Karolinska. It's the most impressive European school where they do the most research. About 38 years ago, they really got in trouble because they came out and said, when you cook a carbohydrate, and what is that? A grain, a bean, bread.
Yeah.
Yes, it's bread, but they're made of grains. It has a carcinogen called an acrylamide on it. And everyone laughed. Oh, they're wrong. It's a done deal.
Yeah.
It's a done deal now.
Yeah.
That's been challenged 875 times. So there are real clear reasons. And by the way, they're great studies, and it's impressive, and it may dazzle you. But my work of 53 years, I've watched what happens when we take people off cooked food and we put them on living, plant-based, organic food. I've watched what happened to me. I lost 120 pounds. My consciousness completely shifted. My muscles grew. I became a happy guy versus a guy who was angry and spitting and cursing all of the time. And this isn't because some magic happened. It's because the original lifestyle of man is raw. What do you think we had? Cook stoves along the way when we were nomads?
I know, that's the thing.
Of course not.
Yeah, you must notice huge transformations with people there, like coming to life with their happiness, right?
Oh, it's amazing.
They must come in there feeling so down and depressed, and then you notice them just coming to life feeling so much happier with the food.
We do. And, the one thing I'm a little jealous about is as a director, and I do a lot of the lecturing and travel and speak and do things like this with wonderful people like you, is our psychotherapists get a privileged view. And they say to me, people come in here suicidal, hundreds, thousands. And by the second and third week when they're graduating, they're happy.
Wow.
They know who they are, their purpose, et cetera. And it's not all diet. Let's also talk about that. you can still be confused if you have patterns of confusion, unless you get somebody like a gifted psychotherapist to help you. Not a wacky psychologist or psychiatrist that's going to drug you. But if somebody can say, you look, maybe you're in a marriage that's not good for you. Maybe you hate your job. Maybe, you know, the city you live in I didn't realize, I'm an upbeat, happy guy. I've always been. But when I lived in the North, I didn't realize I had seasonal depression. You know, everyone would get a little excited at the end of August or September, say, oh, it's getting nippy. I said, oh, crumb. The clouds are going to roll in. And you say, April's going to be nice. Never nice.
Here.
Of course. May's going to be nice. Never nice. If you're lucky, half of June, then the end of August, September, again, it goes down. I didn't realize I had that malaise until I got here. Now I get out of bed every day. I'm dancing, I'm singing. I literally put music on and dance around the house as I'm making juice and taking supplements in the morning. Every day. Now, why? Because environment has a play. In this country, they think there's 80 million people with seasonal depression.
Wow.
I mean, I can't imagine Canada.
No, I believe it. That's why I'm moving to Miami.
I don't blame you.
It affects you. I notice that.
It does affect you.
And I notice I feel less stressed when I come here. You breathe better. The air's better. The ocean. I've heard even just going to the ocean raises your vibration. It makes you feel better.
Yeah, there's ions, electric charge.
Yeah. And what else do you think? Like, exercise is important. And how can people be like you at 72, like dancing around with their juice in the morning? Like, a lot of people get out of bed and they're not feeling so great, or they have nothing to look forward to. You know, you've got a lot going on. You're doing a lot, jam-packed schedule, a lot to look forward to. I notice with like a lot of these, like you, Lou Corona, a lot of people I know in this niche, you're looking forward to things. You're doing things. So how can people, if they're watching this, they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever age, and they want to be like you, any further advice?
Well, let's go back to the last subject we spoke about. You've got to find your purpose. I say P plus P equals S. Personal passion equals success. You don't find that, I don't care what you eat. I don't care how you exercise.
True.
That's it. You got to find your purpose. Write that down, people. P, personal, plus passion equals success. Number two, then you have to fuel it. Now we make, you know, the God food. Food is only a fuel. Don't make this a religion. You know, come on, just eat the food you're supposed to. I don't go into my automobile and put, you know, rocks in there. In my case, they put electric in there. You can put gas in there. So you have to put the food that your body's built for, not a personal opinion or what the animal industry has convinced you and your great-grandmother to do, that you need that as a man. I'll give you an example. I'm a flaming heterosexual. And when I became a vegan, in the first few months, they had so ingrained in our mind masculinity. I said, am I going to become feminine when and it's inversely true.
Well, yeah, even people say that. Oh, you know, you lose your testosterone if you're raw vegan. Like, sometimes guys say that.
Completely the opposite.
Yeah.
When you're eating animal-based foods, it's chock-filled of estrogen. So I know that a big part of why young men are feminized today, and you know that because you're dating young men, they're not men like we used to be, is because of this high estrogenic thing they have in milk and they have in eggs and they have everywhere else. One of my many books is talking about they tested 1 million eggs and 90% had salmonella or E. coli or both salmonella. You don't have to eat them. You just have to touch them. So getting back, the diet has to be what your body's built for, raw and great part green. If you're healthy, little bits of organic ripe fruit, that's hard. So picking berries in the woods in the middle of summer, or having an orange fall from a tree in Texas or Spain or here, that's perfectly fine occasionally for you. I choose not to eat any fruit because I'm
None.
None. I don't eat fruit.
Wow,
no,
Brian.
It's all or nothing for me.
Wow, I love it. This is fascinating.
Yeah. So when I gave up, I lost 120 pounds. I did in a year and a half. When I gave up cigarettes, one day 3 packs went out the window.
Wow.
And if I ate fruit, I'd eat the box. So I know.
I'm like that too. I like that all or nothing.
Yeah, so it's good. You'll be successful in your life. The next thing is you talked about exercise. Now, there are 4 incredibly important things you have to know. You're young, but as time goes on, stretching is going to become incredibly important for you. Because after the ripe young age of 40,
yeah, well, I'm 40, so yeah.
You are, boy, my God, you look damn good. I'm happy to be here with a youngster like you.
The raw foods. Wow.
So at this point, you better be stretching every day 10, 15 minutes.
Oh boy. Even when I work out, I stretch for 2 minutes and I'm like, I'm out
I
of
know.
here. Okay.
Now, if you do yoga, that's a big help.
Okay.
If you do Pilates, a body like you, Pilates are helpful, but not the best thing.
Okay.
Dense people with muscular, they do better with Pilates. You're more of a yoga person and a weightlifting person. You've got to be weightlifting. So stretching is one hardly anyone knows and thinks. After 40, it's 7 days a week. One of the few exercises you have to do daily is abdominal exercise. I do 925 sit-ups in the sauna every single day.
Stop it.
No, that's true.
Wow, what a savage.
And every single year on January 1st, they add 25. So I laugh. I'm writing 4 books now. And one is with the doctor. His wife healed melanoma with us 20 years ago. It's How to Live to 120. And we laugh. We say, if we die at 119, they're going to say, see, it didn't work.
So true.
But in that book, we talk about these things. And stretching, you get repetitive motion. And you're a young 40, but at 50, you're going to see that your body wants to do what you've been doing. When you stretch, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, and I have to fix, talking about abs, in my last pregnancy, my abs split by 4 fingers. I got diastasis recti.
Yeah.
So I haven't done the work to close that gap. So I got to do that too, because it's not good to have, they're weak, right?
That's
too?
it is
Yeah.
weak. And when you get older, it falls, and you're very attractive. You don't want a belly when you're 50.
No, I want to keep it tight.
And you'll do it.
Yeah.
Because you're smart enough to know lifestyle is important. Weightlifting is mandatory. A book that came out in 2020, my wife and I wrote, is called Menopause. And Menopause reveals something that women, 75% of who reads that book are women like you, don't know about their men. So at 19, we're so virile, if we see a tree bent over, we stop the car and want to hug it. We just are horny as can be. But by the time we're 25, that completely shuts off. So at 26, we go into menopause. It's called andropause. Now, here's the weird part that this has on a social abnormality. So let's imagine you marry or with your husband at 19. He's all over you. He kisses you. He can't keep his hands off you. You're making love constantly. At 30, he's not that interested in you. So you suspect.
Yeah.
You suspect that he's looking at other girls, and he may be.
Yeah.
And the reason being because what excites you and me is something new. That's an animal instinct, period. So, but he doesn't talk about this because male's supposed to be virile until the day we die at 100. And that's the snapshot image. But we go into what is andropause, menopause at 26, 27.
Wow.
In this country, in Canada, young 40-year-old men, 50% cannot sexually perform.
Wow.
They have total erectile dysfunction.
This is not a problem of Al Pacino.
Well,
I think it was Al Pacino, right? He's having a baby at 82.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's interesting.
But Al Pacino eats pretty well, too.
Oh, he does?
Oh,
wow,
yeah,
interesting.
You'd be surprised. A lot of these people, he hasn't, but a lot of these folks come through.
Yeah,
We're the come-to place for these people.
Wow.
So the next thing you have to know is that when you build muscle, it helps the brain, the heart, and the libido. Why? Because muscle contains hormone activation. And if you don't have muscle, you're in trouble. And what women were, not your generation, thank God, my generation were told it's not ladylike to lift weight. It's not ladylike, it's the opposite. I think a woman doesn't look good without muscle. That's simple. Just like you don't think a man looks good without muscle.
Yeah.
It's normal. And you can develop muscle at 100 the same as you can at 18.
Wow.
The problem is you have to keep pumping it up. At 18, you can walk around like a peacock for a week.
Yeah.
Every other day you have to lift weight, 3 days a week.
Okay.
So now the next thing is aerobic. The word aerobic came from one of my colleagues, my buddies. He wrote a book many, many years ago, Dr. Kenneth Cooper. And he was a great runner and a medical doctor who wanted to research, first ever, exercise as a benefit. And he put the word aerobic in, and the publisher said, we're going to call that book aerobic. And he said, if you do, I'm not going to let you do it. And they did, and you know the rest of the story. We require a minimum, listen closely, a minimum of 35 minutes, 5 days a week of heart-pounding, sweating, I don't really want to do this aerobic.
Wow.
Now, I'm not a big fan of running. Why? Because I see all the runners at 40 and 50 come to me, even vegans, even healthy people with hairline cracks and arthritis. So high-speed walking, swimming's the best, hands down swimming. Now, if you're in northern parts of the world, that's impossible. But here in Florida, I mean, we freak out when the water gets 75. We won't go in, but you know, swimming's important.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of the wonderful equipment they have now, elliptical machines, which is
I love it.
the great one.
That's what I did this morning. Yeah.
You know, the rowing machines. So these are the things that we need to be doing. And I would like you to do an hour 6 days a week as I do. My day off, I walk on the beach for 5 miles when I'm here and not lecturing.
Wow.
And so why? Because your ancestors 5 generations ago did all of that. They didn't call it exercise, and they didn't have a gym pass. They were farming, so they survived, and that's what they did. They did stretching, they did aerobic, they did weightlifting. And the last one is you need vascular. Nobody even brings this in. Vascular exercise, and that requires, I'll tell a wonderful story. The one thing men are relegated for when you give us babies is throwing babies in the air. How you know you're married to a man? If every time you're not watching, we throw our babies in the air. Now, this is an interesting story. I had an Uncle Richie. He would be throwing the kids all up, and my Aunt Jo was screaming. It like terrorized the whole family. And I said,
Been there, yeah.
I'll never do it.
Yeah.
My wife's not around. My first baby, 40-some years old, throwing him in the air.
Yeah.
I talked to an anthropological biologist, and he said, that's your instinct. And I said, why do we want to throw our babies in the air? He said, to develop the lymphatic system.
Wow.
Isn't this amazing?
That's amazing.
So when it goes up and down. So vascular exercise requires trampolines or crunches. You don't have to do it with weight. You know, up and down. Today I did heavy crunches, but frankly I can't do as well with vascular exercise with weight. It's better to up and down, bend down and get up. And this is as important because as you age, the rigidity, because you get low in nitric oxide of the vessels, you know, there's 74% capillaries invisible, and these veins get rigid. And you want it at 70 years old and 80 and 90 and 100 years old. You want flexibility. So beyond eating a diet rich in nitric oxide, green leafy vegetables, and taking supplements. I created one with a Canadian, by the way, triple PhD, called Circulation Max, so that at any age you're going to have nitric oxide. But these are the things you need to know about exercise. And exercise, let me once again clearly state to you, you cannot and will not be healthy without all of these exercises. I don't care what you eat. One of the problems I have with the vegan community is they all eat and they don't exercise. And they look like hell and they give us a bad reputation. They're too skinny, they're too weak, and they look like they're half of what they should be. And you've got to exercise.
Yeah, we got to step it up.
We got to step it up.
Yeah,
man.
you got me thinking, because at 40, things do seem like they'd start to change, right?
They do.
So you got me thinking, I got to get on a program.
You're a
I mean,
very
as a trainer.
young-looking 40 and sexy,
Thanks,
but the truth
thanks.
of the matter is this 10 years is going to be tough. 50 to 60 is going to be tougher for you.
Yeah, okay, well, it's on. No, now I'm learning a lot in this. I got to step it up.
I'm into active aging.
Yeah,
not
I love it.
Not anti-aging, active aging.
Well, and look at you at 72, right?
Yeah.
I know people at 72, and it is not,
They're
So,
grandparents. I mean, I have 8 grandchildren, but
wow.
yeah.
And okay, so I eat a lot of fruit, right? Like we talked a little bit about fruit. I just want to ask one more thing about that. I eat, 50+% probably fruit.
That's what I did.
I know you're not going to like that. But so if I were to change, say tomorrow you were to give me a program, what to eat all day, like I feel like how am I going to fill
Well,
up?
this is it.
This is my favorite. Nothing
This
makes
is
me
it.
feel better, I swear to you, than green juice.
That's it.
So I could drink a lot of that, but what else? Greens with salads. What about the fats ratio? Do you
Fats-
avocados and nuts? What is ideal to you? What are your thoughts on
Fat's
that?
got a really bad rap because we made a mistake. My wife gives a 2-hour class, do fats make you fat? And healthy fats actually reduce weight on the body. So let's go to avocado, which is a great favorite of mine and not any, but most people in the raw arena. University of Illinois just published last November a study that was mind-boggling to us. Because we told people who were trying to lose weight, I personally, last October, don't eat a lot of avocado. He gave women who were trying to lose weight for a 5-year period 1 avocado a day, not a half an avocado. They lost 1 inch in their abdomen.
Wow.
So now we know that not only is it beneficial oils and fats for the brain, for the body, for the energy levels, and it does give you that filled feeling. And I'm going to tell you something in a minute, but men it didn't do that with, but it didn't put fat on the men. So thank God to the University of Illinois. We appreciate what you're saying. Avocados are great. I'm not sure everyone needs one a day, but somebody like you that has a quick metabolism, sure, you could eat one a day. Mm-hmm. And it is part of the berry family, but it's not a traditional fruit with sugar to speak about. And it has a massive amount of glutathione. Don't get me on that. I could talk about that for 2 hours on that one. That's feeding mitochondria. You also have to know that when you fill yourself up with massive nutrition, now if these had sprouts in it, the green drinks we serve, I just drank 2 this morning before coming, have the protein the average Western person receives in 3 days in one green drink.
Wow.
So it regulates blood sugar. So what's happening to you is what happens to me and a lot of sugar eaters, is that we're gyrating. And when you eat the sugar, your body says, give me more of that energy.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't call a fruit a false energy, but it's a hyper false energy.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have the original amount of sugar in it.
You're more grounded with the green juice.
Much more grounded.
Yeah.
And the proteins are there. So, you've got to balance this. And, there's 2 kinds of people. If you're fighting a disease, you've got to get religion quick. If you're not, you can say, okay, let's do this in a year. The one thing I petition all of you to do for yourself, the future of humanity and the planet, is give up animal-based foods. Even if you go into a vegan junk diet, which is pretty easy to do today, I think most vegans I know are junk food eaters, I'd much rather see you do that. Because if you want to hurt yourself, that's one thing. If you want to hurt all of the rest of it, that's another thing. Now, if you can get to that point and then say, okay, by 1 year from now, let's say we started today, 1 year from now in the early part of next summer, I'm going to be eating 40% of my diet is raw. Great, congratulations, you're not sick. By the following year, 80%. So it doesn't have to be rapid. Some doctor said you have a week to live or 5 weeks to live. Get on the horse and learn to ride it, even if it's kicking.
What is the most miraculous story that comes to mind? If I think one story that you've seen.
For me, it's so hard, love, because really when you say that, it's a plethora of stories.
True, yeah.
The most remarkable I ever saw that I didn't expect to recover, about 20 years ago, a gentleman I know who was in the Navy SEALs, I vaguely knew him, came with his wife, who I thought was drunk or high. She was sitting in the chair and sort of falling off, and her eyes were crossing. And I learned pretty soon they hadn't taken anything from the husband. He said, something's wrong. And I said, you've got to get an MRI. Now, the human brain is 3 pounds to 3.5 pounds. When she got the MRI, her tumor was over 4 pounds.
Wow.
Now, how does that happen?
That's crazy.
I thought they made a mistake, actually. They had to make a mistake. But the reason they didn't make a mistake, because he was part of the elite military, they brought him to the National Institute of Health. And America should be proud of that organization. It does better medical work than anywhere on the planet. And the top Canadian, the top French, the top German, Chinese, they all want to work there. So I knew it was accurate. And I saw the report. It was actually the little opening between the skull and the brain. It was all in there. It was just some cracks and crevices. And they told her the truth, that nobody survives this. Wow. You will die. We can keep you alive another 6 months, 8 months by cutting it out. And she said, should I do it? I said, yes, because you can't see, you can't walk, you can't talk, you can't communicate. And then I put her on the diet, and she slipped off the diet and came back with vengeance. And the doctor went back to the doctor, and they said, we told you can't do a second surgery, that you will be dead in the next 2 months. So she came back and said, what should I do? I said, exactly what I told you to do before. I'm not changing the story. The story is the same. Well, that was almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
You see that. Multiple sclerosis. They're laying in bed. They can't turn their bodies completely well. Now we know. I had a theory that finally was proven not long ago, that multiple sclerosis was a virus attacking the brain. It was proven. University of Chicago. It's chronic fatigue syndrome. When I was a kid, it was called kissing disease, mononucleosis, Epstein-Barr virus. Does it? And so when we've seen these people get well, we didn't understand how until recently. I suspected it was a virus. But when you can get the immune system of the brain to beat the virus up, then the brain stops dysfunctioning at that point. I've seen, we said it earlier, but I'll repeat it. Type 2 diabetes is not a disease. It's a lifestyle choice. I've never worked with a type 2 diabetic that does what we suggest our medical team, that doesn't recover.
Wow.
If you don't get well within 6 months, you're not doing what we tell you. Cardiovascular disease, maybe 3-4% is really a disease. It's a valve that doesn't work. It's lifestyle again. You're sitting on your butt, you're stressed, and you're eating a lot of crap. And by the way, vegans can get this by eating too much sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So the animal body, your body and my body, will create cholesterol from eating sugar.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly it's people eating like I used to eat, pork chops and bacon and the most ungodly bad things. And I would take those and actually fry them in butter. It wasn't bad enough to begin with.
Oh, wow.
So that's how you get it. But 96, 97%, it's lifestyle, can be corrected.
And what about cacao? I know it's technically a fruit, right? I feel like it's toxic. Like, it has negative effects on me. Do you ever include cacao at Hippocrates or in your life?
No, we don't. About 20 years ago, we have a magazine you can all subscribe to for free and get it online. It's called Healing Our World. It's been published since 2000 consistently in the form it is now. And since 1980, it's been consistently published since we became directors. And we did one called Harmful Substances, and cacao was part of it. Not only does it have the notable caffeine in it, the addictive quality of chocolaholic. That's why we call them chocolaholics, because it turns on part of the brain that even sugar doesn't turn on. But but also it has something stronger, more addictive than caffeine in it. Now, if somebody says to me, I love chocolate and once a month I'm going to take some raw cacao, knock yourself out. But I know me, you gave me a little of that, and if I liked it, I'd be investing in the company before you know.
Me too. I'd be eating a whole bar, and then I'd be coming off of it for 3 days.
Yeah. We have this, my wife and I agree with almost everything. We don't fight. But the one ongoing argument we have raw cacao bars in our store.
Yeah.
Because as I walk around our 60-acre campus, tropical campus, I find candy bar wrappers. Now, not a lot, but occasionally. So my hopes, and sometimes I have a bigger imagination than what really is going to happen, is that if we offer something like that, and maybe they won't eat a Reese's Buttercup or some horrible thing out there.
True.
So sometimes you need baby steps. You know, what breaks my heart is when somebody's fighting a big disease and they're doing those things.
Yeah. What do you say when somebody's not fighting a big disease, but they're like, Brian, you only live once. I'm going to have that wine, going to have that bacon, going to have that chocolate. What do you say to that?
I think they need to find a life. They need to find passion. If your joy is eating and getting high, something's wrong. That's all I can tell you. That if food is what you surround yourself with, and it's a social abnormality. Imagine you and I are 20-year-old kids, and we just met, and I'm taking you on a date. And just picture this, people. And I said, I'm picking you up at 7 o'clock. And you get in the car, I shut the car off, and I said, I'm going to tell you what I think about you. What would the average woman do? She'd jump out of the car, call 911, and have me arrested. I'd be arrested. Now let's rerun the wheel. You get in the car, we drive 1 block away, we go to a fine restaurant, and we put food between us. I could say the most absurd thing to you, and you're not going anywhere. Right?
Yeah.
Now imagine it's holiday, it's Christmas as an example, or Hanukkah if you're Jewish. And you say, we're going to have a meal at my house, and I'm your brother, as an example. So we all come there, you're in the kitchen, you come out at 2 o'clock, and you say, by the way, we're going to talk to one another today. We're not going to eat. They would curse at you, ban you, walk out. Food is a narcotic in our culture.
Yeah.
And by the way, it has narcotics in it.
Yeah.
Beyond the sugar, let me go one step more. I was speaking at a major medical conference, and it takes a lot for me not to like you. And the guy that was on before me, I really didn't like, and I was wrong, by the way. Sometimes I'm wrong. My wife says more often than I think.
Yeah.
Dr. David Kessler, who used to run the Food and Drug Administration, I particularly didn't like him because he went after Brzezinski and robbed his patent because he was helping to reverse brain cancer naturally. And the U.S. government robbed the patent, and he was a culprit behind it. but he had actually found himself. And he grabbed my arm in a way that I had to look at him. And he said, I used to think guys like you were quacks, but no more. And to be polite, I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm working on childhood obesity, which somebody like me is alarmed with. In Canada and here and in England, almost 3/4 of our kids are in trouble, overweight. And you think we're sick, you wait. You wait till the next generation. It's unbearable economically and emotionally what's going to happen. And so he said, I wrote a book, and he said, what you need to know, and here I'm about ready to speak to a group of physicians, is that every major international food company, and most of these are all over the world, Nestle, et cetera, have chemists on their payroll that specifically put drugs in the food. And I said, what do you mean? That's illegal. He said, no, these are not illicit drugs. They're knockoff of opiates. And write this down and look it up. It's called hyperpalatability. So the sugar wasn't enough. It's